Why is it that we often focus on the wrong things? Dr. Nick joined us with more. Good to see you, but we do this
Good morning.
even when we know that we shouldn't.
Yes, you're right. Intellectually, we know. Why am I doing this?
And let's talk about some of the big five that we talked about.
I thought that there were the big five.
Well, okay, so what do we concentrate on and focus on that we shouldn't? Big five. One.
Well, let's be careful about the shouldn't yet, okay?
Oh.
We'll come back to that.
Okay.
But right now, I think we ought to try to give it a positive spin.
Okay.
That there's a reason why we do this, or reasons. We sometimes predict the worst. We, always something. When I got my condo years ago, my mother's first comment was hurricanes. Danger. That's we do it. We all do it. We just like, well, what's the worst that could happen?
Okay.
Which, by the way, sometimes is good to play out. What's the worst thing that could happen?
Yes.
And then you get the reality that it may not be as bad as we thought. But the second one was ruminating on the past, holding grudges, just constantly obsessing about something that happened a while back, not letting go of hurt or even anger.
Sure. Or wanting the good old days again.
Wanting the good old days again. Yes, that past can really haunt us, and it can hold us back again from the future. But another of the big five is obviously worrying and thinking, what do other people think? I mean, I grew up thinking, worrying about the Joneses and the Smiths, or comparing, do they like me? Am I approved?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Number four, what we often focus on is I'm not good enough.
I'm not good enough. Yeah.
And
one of the bottom lines.
Yeah. And the fifth, we always need more.
We need more. We need more. Okay.
So why do we do this, and what's it rooted in?
Okay. This guy's hypothesis, theory, is that we have to be careful not to judge it too harshly, because it really comes out of our evolutionary history. We were once cavemen and women. We've had to deal with major diseases.
And that DNA is still in us.
Yes. That ancestral kind of protection, survival, defending. I don't have enough.
Because you never knew if famine was around the corner.
Right. Exactly.
Or if it was ever going to rain again, right?
Listen, I know people now who are extremely wealthy, and they are still living like they're in the Depression because that's when they grew up. Mm-hmm. Now, what does that tell you about short ancestry? And so the issue is not that you're a hoarder or you're it's rooted in your experience. And a lot of this is very old experience. I mean, we've been around many, many years. Wanting more makes sense to me because, again, we've got to make sure we've got enough.
Right.
My mother used to store bottles of water in the shed. And I for what? Well, that was more like the enough. But still, she was afraid we got to have enough. We got to have more water.
I had an aunt who canned vegetables out of her garden, and I'm telling you, she must have had 300. She was never going to eat 300 cans of her green beans and tomatoes and squash.
But she went to bed feeling good.
But she did, and it was right before the winter. So is that probably ancestral?
Yes, it's all rooted in that kind of struggle for survival and protection, which is really fascinating, and we'll get back to them, which is fascinating. The research is pretty clear, Whitney. No matter what we see on TV, read in the paper, think about in terms of today's horrors, this is the safest period in history we've ever lived. Ooh. We don't have plagues. We don't have, horrible. Look at the history.
We're not going through World War II.
We're not going through World War II. I mean, we've got cars everywhere. There are just so many conveniences that help us stay safe.
So why, when our logical brain
tells us that,
why does the illogical part of fear and worry seem to take over sometimes? Because it's just the natural human primitive tendency to think, am I fitting in? Am I likable? Like,
do people like me? Am I being approved of?
Sure, which could come back from the neighboring tribe, and if you all were enemies, they might come kill your whole village in the middle of the night,
Yes,
right? So we
yes,
kind of wanted to be a
yes,
little likable.
Yes, and remember too now, we're not just talking about, let's say, whether you like me or not. Sometimes we don't want to deal with our children disciplined because we're afraid they won't like us.
Oh, that close.
And it absolutely it gets that close. And so as adults, as parents, as therapists, we have to work through this primitive mindset that I want them to like me. That's not that it can really get in the way of what is the right thing to do. The notion of danger, of predicting the worst. You know, Whitney, pardon me, it's not the worst thing in the world to be thinking sometimes of danger, because maybe you've been in a situation like that before. I mean, maybe my mother was in a hurricane, and that's why it popped up in her mind.
Right, right.
Don't you know?
Yeah, there's things that we maybe haven't necessarily gone through, but our ancestors have.
Yes,
yeah.
or parents or other people have that we haven't. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I just thought it was really interesting to look at these, and remember, we're still talking about changing the brain. Aren't we changing the brain when we start saying, oh, I know where this is coming from? Mm-hmm.